students are generally used to doing lab investigations, and also they may be used to occasionally sitting and listening to short lectures. This is another way to teach a topic that is often offered to younger students, reading from just a storybook. But I don't think anybody really outgrows this. I still find it pleasant to listen to a story, and many adults buy books on tape even today. So we all like being read to, I think. And this is an opportunity where you can also order class set, and students can read along with you, thereby improving their reading and writing skills and listening skills, because these things all go hand in hand. I also have a PowerPoint of reading books that you can display on the projector so that they can follow along, and you don't have to hold the book up as if you're an elementary school teacher. You want to treat students with the maturity that they deserve. So this is Nathan's investigation. I use this in my scientific inquiry unit because the young man, Nathan, is working on that in his high school biology class. Nathan's investigation. Nathan isn't sure what he's doing for his science project, but he does know how to practice his tennis serve. While he's serving at the park, he meets Caliph and Ortho, who have been disagreeing about an answer to a very pressing question. Nathan realizes that, by helping his new friends, he will also have a great science project for his biology class. Nathan, Caliph, Ortho, and a swarm of their friends conduct a controlled experiment. Rather than jumping to conclusions, a logical scientific conclusion is reached. Did you need me to get you any supplies for your project on my way home? That was my ma's way of trying to find out what I'd settled on for my research project. Since I didn't know what I was doing, I had no list for her. I just said, "Nah, I'm gonna go hit some balls." I kissed her cheek and said, "See you mañana." She said, "Okay, but it looks like it might rain. Anyway, be home early enough to have dinner with Aunt Jen." I knew Mom wasn't worried about me getting the project done. My academy friends call me a nerd. Mom says I take after her. I work hard. Mom had me when she was young, and as soon as she could, she went back to school to become a nurse. Even now, she was working on another degree, taking night shifts at the hospital to pay our bills. That's where she was headed tonight. Aunt Jen, Mom's sister, stays with me when Mom works nights. Mom working nights is okay with me. I know her studies get her promotions at work. That's why I always try my best in school. But for right now, I'm going to try my best at playing. No rain yet. I have my racket and a hopper of balls. The local court is just a short walk from our apartment, and I want to practice my serve for a while before deciding on my science research project. I remember when I first started playing 4 years ago when I was 10. Daryl and Marcus, my two best friends, were continuing our summer tradition of playing in local basketball and football games. That year, Mom decided I would visit Nana in upstate New York. It was there I started learning tennis in our local National Junior Tennis League offered at the park near Nana's house. Right at the tee with a nice pop. That's what I'm talking about, I said quietly to myself as my serve landed right on the sweet spot. "Hey, dude, watch your aim," said a voice from the opposite side of the court. I looked toward the deuce court and saw no one. I craned my neck around in all directions. There were a few people around, a guy sitting nearby, a mom and some kids. I didn't see anyone who looked like they were talking to me. I took another serve. This time, the ball bounced high and fast after landing in the opposite corner of the deuce court. I barely started my fist pump when I heard, "You almost took my leg off," from a much higher voice than before. Again, I looked, certain this time that someone, or two someones, were talking to me, but I saw no one. I took 2 more quick serves and was stung by a bee. Oh, no, not a bee exactly. And not stung, as it turned out. Hit. I was hit. A large bug collided into me, and before I could swat it with my racket, a smaller bug landed on my visor and was peering down at me. "Don't you have anything better to do with your time?" came a shout from the service line on my side of the court. Now I could see that the large winged grasshopper who was talking to me had positioned himself far enough away to avoid my feet after he had flown into me. "Well?" he demanded. My eyes rolled up to look at the smaller grasshopper still on my visor, who was perched there staring at me. I was just practicing my serve before I started my science research," I explained. The larger grasshopper quickly responded with, "We have our own research going on here, and you're disturbing our investigation." I looked up toward my visor, and the smaller grasshopper said, "That's right," as he rubbed his 2 forelimbs together. "Nothing odd going on here," I thought, as I said, "What are you investigating?" "Well, Ortho here thinks that just because he's bigger than me, he can jump farther," said the little guy on my visor. Said Ortho from the service line to the little grasshopper on my visor. "That stands to reason, Caliph." And to me he said, "What do you think? Doesn't it seem obvious that larger grasshoppers would jump farther than smaller ones? What did you say your name was?" "My name is Nathan," I said. Caliph interjected, "Just because Ortho is bigger and says he can jump farther than smaller grasshoppers doesn't make it so." "That's true," I said. "Were the 2 of you testing this out by yourselves?" Ortho and Caliph both nodded yes. Ortho explained, "That's what we were using the lines on the tennis court for. We were measuring how far we each jumped." I had an idea. "Guys, maybe we can help each other," I reasoned. "I need a topic for my science research project, and you 2 are trying to figure out the answer to a question. If I help you conduct a valid scientific test, can you let me collect the data for my science presentation?" "That sounds like a great idea," exclaimed Caliph, but Ortho was more reticent. "I don't know. You're dangerous with that racket and those big feet," disagreed Ortho. I quickly appealed. "I promise I won't bring my racket, and I'll be very careful." "Okay," said Ortho finally. "I'll start. I'll jump from this line to the net right now." "No, not now," I stopped him. "First I want to read a bit about you guys. Grasshoppers are quite different from people. I want to get a better understanding of your bodies and how you jump. Plus, I promised you that I would help you conduct a valid scientific test." "So, I'm ready now," said Ortho impatiently. "I understand, but you and Caliph are only 2 grasshoppers. Just the 2 of you can't demonstrate that all big grasshoppers jump farther than all small grasshoppers." "I agree," said Caliph. "There are probably thousands of grasshoppers in this park alone. Maybe some big grasshoppers jump farther than small ones. And maybe some small grasshoppers jump farther than big ones." Ortho, understanding now, said, "I suppose that might be true." "Let's meet back here tomorrow," I said. "I'll do some reading and gather some stuff together that may help us, and you 2 find a bunch of friends and bring them with you tomorrow." "How many friends?" said Caliph. "As many as possible," I replied. but both of you should bring the same amount. Back home, I settled down at the computer. I learned that small baby grasshoppers are called nymphs, and that they molt several times as they grow into adults. Nymphs have a lot of energy and jump fast. The size of adults depends upon the species of grasshopper. In general, adults in thousands of species range from about 23 to 28 millimeters. Once adult, grasshoppers have developed full-sized functional wings. The adults' large jumping legs have muscles which produce lactic acid as they work, which makes them tired. I gathered a metric tape measure, a magnifier, pencils, markers, chalk, a notebook, and a calculator to bring to my meeting with Ortho and Caliph the next day. "How was work, Mom?" I asked when I got up the following morning. "Always busy, Nathan. Nighttime in the emergency room is a hectic place." Changing the subject, she said, "I hope you listened to your Aunt Jen." She and Aunt Jen smiled as Jen gave me a hug and headed out the door for work. "Always do, Mom." I was reading about grasshoppers most of the night anyway. I decided to conduct a study about how far grasshoppers can jump. "I'm glad you settled on something," she said. I gave her a hug before I headed off to school. 3 o'clock couldn't come soon enough because I wanted to meet up with Ortho and Caliph to see how many friends they had gathered for our study. I even begged off some basketball with Daryl and Marcus because I was anxious to get started with data collection. Finally, the end of the school day bell rang, and I was off to the park. Fortunately for my grasshopper friends, it was another day that looked like it might rain, so there were no tennis players at the courts. Ortho and Caliph were waiting for me in a grassy area beside the court with 48 of their friends. One of Caliph's buddies questioned me as soon as I arrived. Why couldn't I bring my cousin, he wanted to know. Caliph explained to both him and me. Nathan told Ortho and I that we needed to each bring the same number of friends. There are 25 large grasshoppers in Ortho's group, including another grasshopper in our group would have brought our total to 51 grasshoppers. That's correct, I agreed. A controlled experiment requires that we keep the number of grasshoppers in each type of group equal. Humph, came his dissatisfied response. I addressed the entire group of 50 grasshoppers. Before we get started, let me share the information I learned from my research last night. After hearing what I had to say, one voice from the crowd said, "It sounds like small grasshoppers have way more energy than large grasshoppers. Plus, they don't have all that lactic acid making them tired. Maybe small grasshoppers can jump farther than big grasshoppers." Many grasshoppers nodded their heads and clapped their forelimbs. "Perhaps," said another voice from the crowd, "but big grasshoppers have much bigger muscles in much bigger legs. And let's not forget about their flying ability because they have fully developed wings." Other members of the crowd clapped and nodded their agreement. "Either of you could be correct," I said. "If we hypothesize that large grasshoppers will jump farther than small grasshoppers, our results may either support or refute the statement. To be sure that the grasshoppers were grouped appropriately by size, I measured each of their lengths and had them stand in either the small group or the large group. In my notebook, I titled the research "Study of Large and Small Grasshopper Jumping." I wrote the hypothesis: if small, up to 18 millimeter grasshoppers, and large, 18.1 millimeter or more grasshoppers, are signaled to jump, then the large grasshoppers will jump farther than the small grasshoppers. Just as I was about to ask all the participants to line up and get ready to jump, Caliph walked over to me and asked, "How many times should we jump, Nathan?" Excellent question, Caliph, I said. Once, said Ortho. Once is enough to prove that big grasshoppers jump further than small grasshoppers. The other 24 big grasshoppers clapped and cheered at Ortho's proposal. Right, yay! Boo, hiss! Boo and hiss, came the reply from the small grasshoppers. I'm afraid the small grasshoppers have the right idea here, I explained. The more trials we conduct, the more valid our experiment will be. Ortho and the other large grasshoppers groaned. How about 5 trials, I proposed. Each grasshopper will start their turn jumping from the edge of the tennis court toward the open field. They will take 5 jumps, which will represent their 5 trials. I will measure and record how far they've advanced after every jump. How does that sound to you, Ortho? Asked Caliph. Sheesh, Ortho. I can jump at least to 500 millimeters. All of us should be able to kick some baby bug butt. No problem. Let's do it, said one of the boisterous members of Ortho's crew, and the rest of the large grasshoppers hooted, slapped each other on the thorax, and shouted, Yah! So Ortho said with a smile, It sounds good to us, Caliph. Both Ortho and Caliph nodded at me, so I said, Okay, I'll have the 2 teams, big and small, take turns doing their 5 jumps or trials. Everyone else can observe, and I will measure and record the data after each jump. All the bugs, big and small, made comments of approval. Sounds good. All right, we can do it. Who will be the first participant? I asked the crowd as I gestured to the edge of the tennis court. One large grasshopper stepped forward. With each jump the insect took, members of his team yelled, Woohoo! And way to go. It was impossible not to notice the powerful muscles around the animal's large femurs pushing it to go the distance. And, of course, its wings helped carry the grasshopper even farther. Still, by jump 3, the jumps were coming more slowly, with a bit less vigor. After each of the 5 jumps the insect made, I measured and recorded the distance jumped in my notebook. When the jumps were completed, I made a red dot between the bug's antenna to keep track of which large grasshoppers had taken a turn. Then one small grasshopper stepped forward. Each of its jumps prompted its supporters slightly higher pitched but no less enthusiastic roots of, That's the way to do it! And show 'em how it's done. This tiny animal had noticeably smaller legs and no wings at all, but its jumps came so quickly I barely had time to measure them and record them in my notebook. The small grasshopper's energy never wavered. When the 5 jumps were completed, I made a red dot between the bug's antenna to keep track of which small grasshoppers had taken a turn. I repeated the exact process with the remaining 48 grasshoppers. This is what my completed data table looks like. The total average distance jumped by large grasshoppers was 0.52056 meters. The total average distance jumped by small grasshoppers was 0.3472 meters. This is a graphic representation of the data I collected. I shared the data with my 50 participants who registered their surprise. I heard many in the grasshopper crowd say, Huh, and who'da thunk it? Wow, it turns out that we jump about the same distance on average, said Caliph. I wouldn't have believed it if I didn't see it with the thousands of lenses in my compound eyes, commented Ortho. Yet among the crowd, I also heard several grasshoppers offering a dissenting viewpoint. Nonsense. I saw some of those tiny bugs on the coffee cup in the trash. The caffeine enhanced their performance, said one. The test was supposed to measure distance jumped. The big guys shouldn't get to use their wings, 'cause that's flying, chirped another. To the crowd of grasshoppers, I said, Thank all of you for participating in this study today. The fact that there were 50 of you made our experiment more valid. Based on the results we've obtained, our hypothesis that large grasshoppers jump further than small grasshoppers was refuted. Boo! Hiss! Came the response from some members of the crowd. However, I continued, a number of you have made some important points that must be considered when this test is repeated. Repeated? Questioned Caliph. We each jumped 5 times. How many times do we have to do it? We are done with this test. When I present our findings to my science class, I will share that 25 small grasshoppers jumped only 1.4 centimeters farther than 25 large grasshoppers. I will describe our research thoroughly so that another researcher could study another group of grasshoppers to see if they get similar results. In fact, I continued, I will take some of the ideas I heard from you and include them in the suggestions for improvement section of my report. I like the idea of controlling what participants eat and drink before jumping. We also did not consider what species all of the grasshoppers are. There are 11,000 species of grasshoppers. Those are variables we did not control in our research. Let's not forget that we did not discuss the use of wings providing an unfair advantage, but that's an experiment for another day. By now, I could see that most of the crowd had hopped off to begin foraging in the grass and leaves. Caliph and Ortho lingered a moment with me. Are you going to start in with that racket again? Asked Ortho. Yeah, I really like playing tennis. I think you guys would be safer off of the tennis court, I said. I agree, said Caliph. Come on, Ortho, maybe you can show me how to use these things sticking out of my thorax. Ah, I see your wings are becoming more useful, said Ortho as he jumped off into the higher grass. Jumped off. Caliph started to jump off after him, but first he jumped up onto my shoulder, peered up at me, and gave a little wave of his front forelimb. And with that, he took a flying leap. Did you know? Orthoptera is an order of insects that includes grasshoppers, locusts, crickets, katydids, and wettas. Grasshoppers are a group of insects belonging to the suborder Califera. 1 meter equals 100 centimeters equals 1,000 millimeters. I sincerely hope you enjoyed using this educational tool as much as I enjoyed writing it. If you did, I would greatly appreciate a short review on Amazon or your favorite book or instructional materials website. Reviews are crucial for letting others know of the value of any instructional resource, and even just a line or two could make a huge difference.